How are y'all doing? So is it like, are all of y'all App State students? Some of you staff, I'm assuming.
Well, me and Erica are actually the students. Everyone else,
Yeah.
they're
Oh,
professionals. They are like great in their field. Yeah, so we're interviewing y'all today.
cool.
Okay, so I'd first like to welcome you all today to our Science for Change, Careers for Impact little panel sort of thing. I am Erica, and I am a career guide with the Career Development Center at App, and I have Meredith with me today.
I am part of the ACT office, which is the Appalachian Community Together, the service organization. You guys have probably heard of it, but that's why I'm on today.
And if you guys like to start introducing yourselves with like what you do, like where you work, what you do, and just like briefly talk about just like what you're doing right now. Whoever wants to go first.
I can jump in. So my name's Courtney, and I'm right now a postdoctoral researcher at Penn State University in the Earth and Environmental Systems Institute there. EASY is the acronym. That's much easier to say. And I've been there since August. And prior to that, I was working on my doctoral degree at the University of Idaho up in Moscow, Idaho, in the Water Resources program. So my research at Penn State kind of relates to flood risk and how communities are adapting to flood risk, particularly in these little rural towns.
I'm Charlotte Baker. I'm an assistant professor of epidemiology at Virginia Tech. My academic home is in the vet school, but I work with the medical school and across the university to help figure out issues about the human condition. So how do we improve health of people? As an epidemiologist, that's basically who gets sick, why they get sick, and how do I keep getting sick again? So I use really cool data, go out and talk to people. Before I was here, I was at Florida A&M University as a professor, and at CDC as an academic intelligence service officer. And prior to that, I was at getting my doctorate at University of Kentucky.
Well, I bet you had a busy last year, Charlotte.
Yes. Me and COVID are very good friends. I wish we weren't, but we are.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for your work there. Hey, everyone. I'm Josh Brooks. I am with Rocky Mountain Institute. I'm at this period now where I'm actually wrapping up a few projects that took up the lion's share of 2020. One of those was a energy regulatory reform process for the state of North Carolina, initiated by Governor Cooper's Executive Order 80. So basically, we took the relevant stakeholders in the state. That could be, well, that was people from the governor's office, the major utilities, state legislators, but then also power purchasers, Sierra Club environmental groups, et cetera, to kind of design new legislation for the state to reform the market to kind of meet 21st century needs. Did a very similar thing in California, but for a much smaller scale, kind of retail side of things, as opposed to broader market reform. And I am currently based in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, cool. So yeah, those all sound really great. And so I imagine it was like a long path to get to where you are now. And so we were curious to know, like, what were some of your experiences in your undergrad or your time at Appalachian State, and any like internships you had or what you were involved in, or any important things that on your career path that led you to where you are today?
A lot of things. I would say that when I was an undergrad, one, it was really, really helpful for who my advisors were, my academic advisors. So I switched my major a couple of times for interesting reasons, but ended up in health promotion, which now I think is a public health major, and took a class with Dr. Alan Utter, who's now over in Texas, in epidemiology, and absolutely fell in love and was like, this is exactly what I think I want to do. So did a couple internships, one with Project Imhotep at Morehouse College in CDC, and the other is a Big Ten institute. They've now renamed themselves CIC SROP. So I was at Michigan State for a summer in the National Food Safety and Toxicology Center. Then did grad school at Pittsburgh, one because Dr. Alan Utter had done all his degrees at Pitt, and so he kept talking it up. And my mom had actually gone to Pitt as well. So ended up there, then ended up at Kentucky, then at CDC as an Epidemic Intelligence Service Officer, which basically is like CDC's ready force. So a lot of times when you hear about CDC is on the ground somewhere, that's what we're doing. And I would say that definitely the academic advisors, and they're pushing for, just soaking up what's there, soaking up what's available for service in the Boone community and around. I really got a chance to realize I loved working with people, but also really loved working with data. And so that's what I do.
Yeah, I can play off that a little bit because it sounds like you did well, actually, I think your path is a little unusual in that you left academics, worked for the CDC, and then came back into academics. And I think a lot of times, like, you might have a mentor who tells you not to do something like that. If you want to become a professor, you have to stay on this path. And like, one thing that's been true for me is that it's not really this linear path, or you're having to follow this little like step-by-step cookbook, but like things that I like to do in determining my path. And I know it's like a hard time when you're an undergrad trying to figure out what you're going to do when you're done, but journaling a lot, like talking to my mentors, not being afraid to like sometimes people seem like they're really busy, but not being afraid to be like, no, I need some guidance here. You're not going to like figure it out on your own. So I've always tried to find mentors. I know Alan Utters would be a great mentor. I saw him a little bit. I got my master's actually at App and did my undergrad at a small school in Georgia called Berry College.
In Rome, yes.
Yes.
I went to high school in Rome, so.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Yep. So I was a cross country and track and field athlete there. So I see your App track and field sweatshirt as well. So lots of little connections. And at Berry, it was really easy to work on research as a student, just get involved, figure out what professors were doing. And there's a pretty good environmental sciences program. So I've sort of followed that track in a fairly nonlinear fashion. But one thing when I was at App, I have to give a big shout out to Dr. Baker Perry. He was a really awesome mentor. He has going down to Peru and really understanding these big, large-scale climate dynamics that are now playing out in our little local communities. And so that sort of set my path on this like water resource change and adaptation track for my PhD, which was a pretty applied program. And I've always got to like kind of work with different community partners. And I think if you want your research to have impact in the real world, you can't just like sit in academics and do that. You have to talk to people and build trusting relationships. So those are a few first thoughts.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree with, all of that. Well, share a lot of that same experience, especially the zigzag, the nonlinear path. I did not want to go to college and openly resented people that did. Like, I'm from like rural Appalachia, white trash, trailer park kind of country is really my background. And I'm not trying to be funny, but it was like one of the more economically impoverished areas in the state. And I wasn't going to go to college. I was going to just follow the trades, get into residential construction. And then one day my mom said, "You're going to college." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to get hit, so I'm going to go." I'm kidding. My mom, was lovely person, but she was like, "You're going to college." And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And then I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I jumped around like 50 different majors and drove my academic advisor completely nuts, I'm sure, because I came in for an architectural design degree. But then I thought, well, political science would be fun, but so would philosophy, so would ancient religions, so would physics. And then one day my advisor said, "Josh, you're never leaving unless you pick something." And all of my coursework was so diverse, the only thing that would absorb all of that was a history degree. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm doing, history education. And so I did that. The thing that ended up being a really big, I don't know, I guess motivator or inspiration for the work that I do now was because I started off in like the tech and the trade stuff at App. I retained a lot of friends there, and they basically said, "Hey, hey Josh, we're in this group. It's really cool. It's called the Renewable Energy Initiative. We've got a bunch of academics in the group, people who are wanting to be engineers, really into the numbers. But what we lack is someone who can run their mouth. And as you all now know, I'm quite well versed in that skill set, if nothing else." So I was like, "Yeah, I'll get up there and be on a soapbox." But energy quickly became the master key for me to help unlock a number of problems that I had but didn't know how to articulate. So for me, energy, not only does it address climate change, it's directly related to healthcare and food security and water. And like, to me, energy is the lens that I kind of navigate the world. And so it took me from being just this like redneck to this guy who was really interested in politics and policy and human rights and equity and all of these things. But for whatever reason, it took understanding more about energy to help me like understand where the problems were and where like stuff as simple as like the cost of carbon or resources aren't adequately evaluated or considered in the market. And you just start pulling at that thread and you realize how many of these systems are contrived and exist simply because it's the way that they've been for 100 years and no one's thought to change them. So that was it for me. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'm just going to use this and just raise a lot of hell. This sounds like fun.
And I will say, as someone who works in health and healthcare and all that, we need more people like you, definitely, who aren't afraid to get out there and say what needs to be said and helps, create path for the rest of us to get some of the cool stuff done. So thank you for that work.
Well, I literally just got off the phone with my insurance company for some surgery I have to have done tomorrow. So this is quite well timed to just be talking about all this stuff. I'll have to tell you offline the interesting question I posed to my healthcare provider and kind of left them speechless. It was funny.
Yeah, I'll definitely wait for that one.
Yeah.
That's actually really interesting because my dad is also like a healthcare professional, like he's a nurse right now. And I know how overwhelming and stressful it can be during this time. So I would just like to hear how you stay motivated right now.
Dogs, books, doing things like this. You have to find the fun in life. I mean, so one of the things that I get to do as an epidemiologist, as a person who's a public health person, is try to tell everybody else how to stay sane in these times. And so definitely exercise is huge. So even if you're not a normal exerciser, just walk in your house, talk to people on the phone, Zoom people when you can. If you've got neighbors and friends who don't really know how to use the internet, go and show them, and that gives you some interaction and gives them some as well. But right now, I'd say knowing that I'm helping people is a huge part of it, but also taking that time for myself. Therapy has been super important for me in this last year, kind of getting to, blow my steam, blow my top a little bit every once in a while, and just pacing it out. Just you can't overwork yourself, and you can't feed others from an empty cup. So.
Yeah, and also, so Courtney and Josh, at climate change, I'm sure is it's hard to stay motivated working in the field of climate change as well. And that's a question that you guys might get a lot, but I hear a lot. It's like, how do you stay motivated when you focus on the issues and stay like encouraged to continue doing the work that you're doing?
Scotch, really. Like I'm kidding. That don't tell people I said that, or do.
It's real.
Yeah, it's hard, it is really hard to quantify something that is as broad. I mean, you think things are difficult in the Middle East now. Wait until water access is the problem, right? And not an economy linked to declining oil sales. It is difficult, and I would say that I'm certainly not anyone to model a healthy lifestyle after. I mean, my primary motivator is kind of irritability at the state of things and wanting it to change, and like not, I don't. If a new generation is growing up in harder circumstances than the previous generation, then we failed, right? And like that's just unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And I don't want people to have to grow up in that world. And so that's my motivator. I mean, like that is why I do what I do. It was the last 4 years were completely ridiculous with, that dumb some bitch up there in the White House and everything he was doing, and all the people who like lost their jobs. I mean, it was a convenient thing that I didn't directly go into the solar industry. A lot of my friends who did lost their employment, you know, and that was, it was really hard to be in an industry where for the last 4 years your government was actively against your work. That was hard. But the way that I coped with it, meditation for me has been kind of a godsend or a lifesaver for me. Trying to collect my thoughts, reading. I read a lot, and as many different subjects as possible. You know, it's always tempting to pull a book off the shelf that is directly aligned with the industry that you're already in, but I get a lot of value out of reading stuff that I know nothing about. I have one of my favorite books is a book on neuroscience, and I know nothing about it, but it's just so interesting. And there's fiction has been a great thing. Music, you know, like all of these things are scaffolding to kind of keep the engine fueled, to keep the work going. But I really, you know, Charlotte's point about you know, you can't serve others from an empty cup or something to that effect, you know, it is quite true.
Yeah, and I find a lot of motivation in learning, kind of as Josh was talking about. So just continually challenging my brain and kind of my physical state as well, just getting outside. One of my New Year's resolutions this year was to camp in a tent one day every month. So there's little things like that to keep me going. But yeah, at a more institutional change level, which it sounds like, you know, Josh and Charlotte are both involved in, it's just knowing that there's a lot in our current system that isn't right, and that there are these like kind of really areas of low-hanging fruit still that can be changed, like for flooding, that's this legal standard that we use, the 100 and 500 year floodplains, which is really an inefficient way to adapt to flooding, to manage flooding. And so our lab really works a lot at like, what are the alternatives? Why do we have to use a standard that was established in some workshop in the 1960s as our policy, when we could have something more flexible, more adapted to climate change instead? And so, I mean, of course, you know, there's plenty of like the dark days, you know, where you're like, this isn't ever going to change or whatever. You know, there's those problems we all face. But I go ahead.
Well, but like this is something I haven't thought directly about for both of your industries, but you know, like the reality is with floodplains, for example, 100-year floods are now becoming 2-year floods. And then Charlotte, I'm sure, I think that I've seen some publications on this, but just like the changing climate, the you know, rise in heat and all this stuff just makes the occurrence of these major kind of like pandemic level events. Well, it certainly doesn't discourage them, right? It kind of is a good
definitely it increases them. It gives them more opportunity to be there.
Yeah, which is
huge.
Sorry, go ahead, Courtney.
Oh, just there's a huge nexus between climate and health, and that's
it's all connected. It's so all connected. And I was saying, like when Courtney was talking about, you know, this is so inefficient and we should be doing this better. It's the same thing for me. It's like, why are we not looking at some of these issues in a different lens? Like, why are we still doing what people did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago? It is insane. It doesn't work that way. And so part of what my research lab, which yes, we primarily work on physical activity and sports injuries and stuff like that, but it's really broad-based for how do we even collect data about people and their human health and their climate, and how do we then put that together to answer those questions? So then we can say, you know, not 20 years from now we're going to do something with this, but how do we do something with that information today and really fix that problem? You know, so climate, I lived in Florida when, you know, as a state person, we couldn't even say climate change. You couldn't say, like, that was a state mandate that you could not say climate change on anything. And our big public health conference focus was climate change. So all the state workers had to come up with a new way to say climate change to get into that conference. So, you know, what the two of you do is so crucial to how we're going to approach public health stuff, you know, moving forward. So
I imagine it is an incredibly difficult thing, like Charlotte, and I'm directly trying to respond to something that you said about like acting on what we know is going to happen, not what happened a couple of decades ago, right? And it seems to me that it would be true that the mechanisms you all have to evaluate the service you're providing are also based on a couple of decades ago. And so not only are you trying to push everyone else that, hey, we have these health concerns that we have to address, but also the severity of them and our need to be more flexible and respond more quickly. Well, quite frankly, we're just not funded in a way to do all that we need to do. So not only are you saying we need to, the purview of our occupation has increased, but we need to be more flexible. We need to think of more things. Oh, and we need more money to do this almost the same basic level of care because the number of hazards has increased.
Exactly. And the amount of funding, we have for the health side, because to me, environment is a part of health. And so even thinking about, when both of your fields identify a problem, it's still just like health, it's still the whole thing of somebody has to put forth the money. So government is a primary funder for a lot of the work that we do. There are private groups like Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and some other ones that really put money forward. But if we're still basing all of our science on 50 years ago, 100 years ago, the funding opportunities are the same, no matter how much they try to say, oh, the funding opportunity is to answer this new question. But everybody's still reviewing, when you put in a grant application, it still gets reviewed by somebody who still have that backwards lens. And so it's really hard to be groundbreaking. So again, the scotch, the bike, the going to be in a tent is all important for continuing to make yourself push forward to say, look, even if I don't have money to do this, I'm going to show you this works and it's going to make you do this. And so I've kind of hit both sides of, I get, grant applications turned back of, we don't really understand what you're talking about versus, I'm just like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to find somebody, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to work with somebody like Courtney and Josh to show you if we could actually make this happen. And that's going to make that funding mechanism change, make people open up more money to really answer current questions, not historic questions.
Yeah, and as a tip for the younger generations, like don't be afraid of things that are like open source, open data, kind of transparent processes. Like it can be kind of scary. Like for me, I was as a geography student at App, even like I liked using the big software that was available to that we had to pay thousands of dollars for. But now like yeah, but like computer programming is something that like whenever I was in high school, like that was always like, ooh, that's something I can't do, like that's just like too technical. And I still have those days where I struggle with it, but you can really learn about these things. They're not hard, and it's an amazing community that there are people trying to do things in really open and transparent ways.
Actually, going along with that, you guys have a lot of like great tips for like how to keep yourself motivated and everything, but is there something that you wish that you knew when you were our age? Like, is there something that you wish you would have learned in like undergrad or even like in an internship that you wish you knew now?
I would say as a professor, I talking to professors, sometimes we really downplay how much work we do. So I really wish that I had really known how much work my professors put into the work that they do. Because when I got to become a professor, I was like, how do you get this all done in a 24-hour day? How do you sleep? How do you do the rest of these things? So I wish I had known that because I could have better prepared myself for kind of like the rude awakening I got. But listen to your professors and community people and everything else. Like I did a lot of work through ACT and through other community service organizations in Boone and surrounding areas. And so even the issues that I learned about from the people who live in the community, so just listening was huge. It actually still feeds into the work that I do, the lens I take on the work that I do now, which is I can think I know everything about, Avery County, but I don't. I'm not from Avery County. I need to talk to people from Avery County to see what's going on so then I can take what I'm doing and apply it and mold it for what they're doing. So listen to the community, listen to your professors, which I think is cliche, but talk to them about their experience and the barriers they face, because we face a lot of them. And sometimes we make it seem like we, have all the answers, but we don't. And so being more open in science about what we don't know is really going to help you see where you might be able to make a difference, and don't be afraid to go there if nobody else is there, because there's still people that will support you.
Yeah, I would play on that, say leaning into failure is something that's hard to learn, because failure feels scary. And I mean, I'm still, struggle with that, but the cliche, of course, like you learn the most when you do fail. It's not all just an easy path. You got to take the one that's more challenging. And so like really one of the like most basic takeaways that I really could offer is just, if you're working on something, a project, just ask for feedback early and often from the people that it may impact. So you don't like spend months and months working on something that you think is a great idea, and you realize it's just your ideas. It's not this collective. And so yeah, don't be afraid to seek out advice and help.
And don't be afraid to tell other people when you failed, because we all fail. I fail every day. It's not necessarily the most comfortable feeling, but be able to say early on, like, hey, I failed. What can I do better? Because sometimes I do have students who will wait 6 months and we could have fixed it 6 months ago. So it just prolongs your time working on a problem.
Yeah, that everything that y'all said is just you're talking about it, and even these weren't ideas that readily came to my mind, but I was like, oh man, yep, that happened. Oh wait, yep, that happened to me too. And so I've got a couple. I'll try to be brief. One, yeah, like there is, particularly when you're younger in your collegiate career, there is this fear of being wrong in class or wrong in any kind of situation, and being embarrassed. And it's like, I love when I'm wrong because I've got a pretty negative view of humanity and the world. But when I'm wrong, it means something good happened, right? Like that's a good thing. So I love being wrong. So that's something to embrace. I find that I do my most work or my best work when I am uncomfortable, when I don't know really what the hell I'm doing, and I'm just like willing to try. And I've got that kind of stress driving me, that I tend to do my best work there. There's also this kind of thing that, like, no one knows what the hell they're doing. Let's just put that out there. We're all doing the best we can, but no one knows what the hell they're doing. And every sector that any of us are in are changing so fast, we can't keep up with it. We're just doing our best to stay in the loop and not make a mess. But Charlotte did say this point about professors, and I cannot emphasize enough the quality of mentors and that you can find, and just listening to everyone and hearing people where they're at. But professors in academia, the way that the business model is set up isn't necessarily to educate people. Like, there are people who are in universities for all the right reasons, but the university structure isn't incentivized to provide education. It's incentivized to be a resort with a football team. That's what App is, and it's ridiculous. And they're not really, their first priority isn't education, right? And now that puts the professors and the people who are doing like the student programs that provide opportunities for this video, like we're doing right now, in a really difficult position, because they want directly what's the best for the students and to provide this platform for education and excellence and to excel. However, the upper levels aren't necessarily incentivized the same way, because they have to run a business in a market economy that doesn't evaluate their core service, which is education. And that's a terrible disincentive. Professors aren't incentivized to be honest about how overworked they are and how much they're doing. And that's a shame, because it's this barrier. It prevents people like me from actually understanding what was going on when I was in education and thinking about becoming a teacher and all of this stuff. There wasn't an incentive for the professors to be like, look, this is exactly what we're doing. So much of what I have to do is BS that just allows me to talk to you about an idea and help you learn something. And that's just such a shame, right? And I wish at the time I had known that everyone was acting based on this kind of broader market structure that really wasn't aligned with everyone's education, despite everyone's best interest, because you are going to have the best professors in the world, the most dedicated support staff, and even like development officers who are trying to raise money because they love the kids and love the students and all this stuff. But it's not that easy. And what we're like, when you get really like proactive students, like I was, you know, I was a nuisance to everyone. And I didn't realize until way too late that if I succeeded all of my crazy energy projects, what I've done at the university is ask someone to do more work for no more pay.
We
And
love
that's
to do it.
yeah. And that's the thing, is like, we know that Charlotte and Courtney and Jennifer, who's recording this call, they're going to help you because they care about your success, but they don't, that isn't recognized, you know, from the upper levels down. And
Or we're actually
it's just
told to do, or we're actually told to do less of that,
Right,
because
right,
it doesn't focus where the university wants us to focus.
right,
But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You should definitely ask.
right.
If you find a professor who's willing to, you know, spend that extra time, we don't mind it. We're willing to fight that kind of bureaucracy, because we're also fighting what that bureaucratic structure looks like from the inside.
Absolutely.
But just know, if you've got a professor who's sitting there listening to you, because academia will chew you up and spit you out, just like any of you who are interested in going into, you know, K-12 education, it will also chew you up and spit you out. That's just part of what you do. It's I want a better academic system, so I'm going to make it, but realize that you're kind of a pawn in this system that you don't see, and you should just recognize that. But it means you should take advantage of everything that somebody offers, because if there's an opportunity, it means somebody fought to make it available for you.
A great point. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a teacher more than anything, because I was like, these people make an impact. They do stuff that nobody else sees. So I'm kind of wondering, why do you guys work? Like, what makes you want to work with like making a positive impact for others?
Because it's the price you pay. If you want to be on this earth and you want to reap the benefits of being here, you help other people. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so for me, it's just, I had to find a way that I could make the best impact on other people. And it happened to be through health, through public health and epidemiology. So when I talk about, like, I use big populations, whereas you might go to a doctor and that's a one-on-one interaction with a doctor or a nurse practitioner or something else like that. I look at millions of people at a time and the patterns that are within that information. And so I kind of take it as, I have the knowledge, somebody has put into me this knowledge to be able to help one person by looking at millions of people at a time. And so if I can do that, and if I just help one person, I've done exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And so every day, that's kind of the lens that I go out with, which is, I do what I do because it's helping somebody. And if I ever lose track of that, then I'm not doing the right thing.
One of those awkward Zoom moments.
Well, I just went on a whole monologue, so I think I need to shut up for a little while, you know.
Well, and Charlotte summarized my thoughts on that really, really well. And then, I mean, I think it's true for my colleagues. You know, we all, like, so for some of the people I work with, for instance, have been in industrial jobs before and have come back into academics. And something that I've heard a lot is, like, the space that allows you to continue. I mean, you find a lot of positivity in a space that allows you to continue, like, working on the unknowns, the things that are uncertain and complex, and that, you know, have the potential to have real impact in people's lives. Water research. So I'm, you know, really a social scientist, and that's kind of unusual for my background, because I'm working with engineers and hydrologists and climatologists primarily. But that, you know, at the same time, all those people, they're, you know, so they're kind of doing similar work to what Charlotte's doing in some ways, like this really big scale analysis. And so I find a lot of positivity in, like, the places where you can try to downscale it to a community level by talking to people, by figuring out what's happening on the ground.
Yeah. Well,
right.
Well, that's something actually I do want to touch on just a little bit, because, like, I think, you know, I kind of bill myself primarily as a historian. I have a history degree. I got frustrated with the situation I was in my last semester of grad school and dropped out because I was just so dissatisfied with the structure around me that I realized that there was just a lot of things that made it really clear to me that the problems I was interested in solving, there just wasn't a platform to really talk about them in a way that wouldn't punish those around me. And I left and ended up working in the energy industry, developing power plants and everything based on this experience I had that was periphery to my academics, but certainly provided there at App with the Renewable Energy Initiative, and that kind of shaped everything for me. But it is totally we can, be scientists and do this whole data thing and really put this research on a platform, but what are the motivations behind why you're doing it? And it's kind of like both Charlotte and Courtney said far more articulate than I'm clearly capable of doing, but it's like you have a moral obligation to help those around you. If you can get through the door, it's why shut it and make it harder for someone to get through it. Just hold it open.
And I think the real cutting edge of science right now, it's doing the right science and getting the science right. And that requires this real iterative loop where scientists can't come in and say, we're going to solve the problem. We have the research question. It's much more of a process that you're learning together. You have expertise, and you have to figure out where all that expertise kind of fits together in this messy puzzle.
Yeah, because it's definitely a puzzle. And so, you can come into any of the science, from whatever background, from whatever particular expertise, how you grew up. I grew up in the Mississippi Delta, and so there was definitely need there. So, I'm enjoying those of you who work in climate science and earth science. But your life experience gives you a perspective on how the science works, but it may apply very differently across the country and in what you do and where you are. And so being open to the fact that the community knows better than you about some of the things. I do see some people in science who are like, well, I know because I have the degree. And I'm like, well, you don't, because you don't live there and you don't live their experience. So knowing that your degree only gives you certain pieces of knowledge to then go help, and you have to figure out how to use that knowledge along with the community, I think is so key.
Yeah, I'm going to get everything she just said tattooed across my chest. Like, that was perfect.
Yeah,
we all have a back tat with that. Yeah.
I really like that too. That's basically ACT's whole mission is to try and get to know the communities that they're serving. And I'm also from Appalachia, as Josh mentioned. So I really love when people, Appalachia, mention getting to know these communities that are often overlooked. So y'all have offered a lot of really good advice and advice that I've never heard before, and just some really interesting insights. But are there any final pieces of advice, like motivational taglines, or any tips for using science for a positive impact for people who might want to either enter the specific field you're in or one similar to the one you're in?
Yeah, I've got a couple, and I'll go first. That way I am short. I have, I've had the great privilege to capitalize on everyone else's low standards, right? That's the only way I've ever done anything. I just fell upwards. But I've found that the easy, as long as you are sincere, and when you're in a moment with someone, be in the moment, just be there. There's going to come a time, even when you're a college student, if you're talking to someone back home who doesn't think they've got a way out or may not have any kind of line of sight to anything other than taking care of their grandmother who's in failing health or whatever the circumstance may be. There are a variety of people, no matter what your life situation, in which you are a great example of something they hope to achieve. And when you have the great fortune to find yourself in that opportunity, it doesn't make a damn what's going on your phone or in Twitter or the internet or anything. Just be there and listen to them. Just offer your time, your humility, and your sincerity, because there's a learning opportunity there. And if you go into quite literally any interaction and your behavior is somehow met with dismissal, then that person isn't worth your time anyway. And there's all this other BS I could say, but that really it has been it. Everyone's got a story, and sometimes they don't get to share it. And if they don't, that's a shame.
And I'll definitely piggyback on that and say, one, being an underrepresented minority, racial ethnic minority, but also being from the Mississippi Delta, which is a definitely underserved area, just like Appalachia. People definitely don't, a lot of people still to this day will assume that I don't know. I've walked into places and people thought I was a waitress or somebody else there to give stuff, and I'm the keynote speaker. So I laugh at it because sometimes you can't do anything but laugh. But it also motivates me to continue to be a face and a voice and somebody to give space and opportunity to those who are coming behind me, who people don't think you can do if you're from Appalachia. They don't think you can do if you're a person of color. I'm underrepresented in my field for a lot of different reasons. And so every time I can give an opportunity for that, I'm doing it, because if somebody else doesn't look like you in the field you want to go to, they're not from where you're from, they don't have the background you have, it doesn't mean you're not supposed to be there. It just means that you need to find the people who are going to support you in being where you are. And so there's plenty of organizations. Twitter actually is one of the best ways I find to communicate with people and to communicate my ideas. And it's actually gotten me some really cool networks, out there. I live in Appalachia now, so Blacksburg, Virginia, even though Virginia Tech is gigantic, is in Appalachia, so Southwest Virginia. And so some of the issues that we face in Southwest Virginia are similar to what is being faced in the Boone area. And some are different just because it's Virginia versus North Carolina. So government issues kind of back and forth. But don't let somebody else tell you you can't do something. Like, that should be the bottom line ever. If a grad program or a professor says you can't do something because of who you are, and it's because of who you are, find somebody different. There's always something out there. And it doesn't have to be the Harvards of the world. It can be State U. It really doesn't matter. But do the thing that you're passionate about. Reach out to other people. You don't have to know them personally. You can still make a network and it will still work. But don't forget where you came from. Everything I do is still to eventually help the people where I came from. Is to help the Mississippi Delta, to help Mississippi, which tends to rank in the bottom three. We have this back and forth fight with Louisiana and Alabama to see who's the worst in the country at a lot of things. And it's to help move things forward. It's to help move Appalachia forward, because I'm very passionate about Appalachia. It's why when I'm buying those books that like Josh and I were talking about, I buy them for Foggy Pine. Foggy Pine will ship them to me. So I do that because I think that you should help bring up the people who have just as much struggle as you had. And so you got to figure out a way to do it. And if you don't know, ask somebody.
Yeah, it's hard to add on much to those. Those are, the listening, the falling upwards, and then not forgetting your past are really all great things to think about. Actually, just in a webinar yesterday, we all gravitated towards this move at the speed of trust line, and I don't know, it's still like kind of resonating with me too. Like, there's going to be times where you're frustrated in whatever direction your career is headed because people around you aren't working at the right speed or whatever it is, but finding that like the speed of trust, it's really qualitative and normative, but that I think it's important for our careers, and like it's definitely in what I do. So those are kind of the main points I would add there.
That's a good line. Speed of trust. I'm going to use that. That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that for community work. Yeah,
because for sure.
I see how it works with my community stuff. I could have the greatest idea and be ready to go, and the community's not ready to trust me yet. So it takes time to get that trust with a community, and that they know that you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah.
And that they have your best interest in mind, you know, because it's a two-way street, but definitely that you have theirs in mind before anything can ever happen. And we see that, I think, with particularly, I'm, you know, being a Southerner, everything doesn't necessarily look like it's for us. And so how do you show me that you really are there for me? And if I can trust you, we're good to go. We can move full steam ahead. But if I can't, I'm not cooperating at all.
Mm.
Yeah, I think for all of us now, we're especially people who are innovative and wanting to make positive change. So we're being tested really hard right now, like not being able to just drop into community meetings and have conversations and share meals with people and all that. It's been really, you know, challenging for everyone in the last year. And I think just in the last couple of months of seeing how the innovators are still out there doing the same work, but we're finding ways to do it in kind of creative spaces. Like, so, you know, it's easy to just be like, oh, well, this pandemic came along and it ruined all my plans. Life sucks. And like the negative spiral kind of continues. But there are a lot of people out there who are staying on the like more positive outlook and embracing opportunities like this. Like, there's no way I could have come to Appalachia or you know, up to Boone, you know, to do this talk, but now I get to meet these great people and share this time. Just video conferencing technology.
Yeah, video conferencing has definitely helped, but we have to think about how many people don't have that. You know, one thing we've talked a lot about in my area with the pandemic is you've got elderly people and people who don't have internet access, but the only way to register to get a vaccine in your state is through the internet. So it's partnering with groups like mobile libraries and other community organizations like Meals on Wheels to take hotspots and tablets and show people how to use them so they can get registered, or to pass along, you know, how they can call somebody or that kind of thing, of to be able to get them, they can call in and get registered. So you've seen community really come together, I think, during this pandemic of, I have your best interest in mind. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. But every community is so different. Right now, we've got a lot of things about vaccine hesitancy, and the populations that, you know, from previous examples of creating vaccines were not the group that was treated very well in doing it. And that's not only racial ethnic minorities, but people in Appalachia, people with disabilities. You know, we tested things on them without consent, and that's not cool. We don't do that anymore. So it's still a matter of me going out and showing them, if they trust me, I can go out and I can help you understand what this vaccine does. And you know, here's opportunity, I can help you get this, and that kind of thing. And it needs more people who understand, who are from those communities, who listen. Because we got to get out of all of this together. We got to get through climate change together. And because the climate is not going to stop changing until we stop changing what we're doing. And even then it's going to keep changing, because that's just how the world works. So how do we all work together?
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for providing this opportunity for us. And I think me and Erica have really enjoyed talking to y'all and getting this personal and professional advice. It's been really, really insightful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Courtney sent me this private message, but I'll ask it. She wants to know, how do we get paid? I'm kidding. She did say that. She did say
I was like,
a good service pay. Yes.
No, this was great. It was a pleasure meeting all of you and talking to you. And I feel good. I feel the best I felt all week after listening to you folks. Y'all are smart. This is good.
Feel motivated.
yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
Right. They work for a couple hours.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, reach out anytime. You know, if y'all got questions, or you know, you have any fellow students who may see this or whatever, and they're like, oh, hey, the hippie guy with the Southern accent who's in clean energy, how does that happen? Well, send them my way, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for
if
providing.
Anybody can find my accent and send it back to me, I'd appreciate it. So.
I've got it. I borrowed it, I think. Okay. I absorbed them, and it just adds on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope y'all have a great rest of your day.
Yes.
I feel very motivated, and yeah, and talking to people from like this region, different lines of work, it's really awesome. It was really great.
Super
Appalachian
cool.
State is a great place, especially
Yes,
for
it
Mhm.
is. Yes, it is.
So